Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the Training, Learning, and Development community. Thanks for being here. Today, we have another member showcase, and this one features Sylvia Cherry, who is a TLDC member. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for your support. And thanks. We're doing this a little different. We're using Google Meet for this recording versus using Crowdcast. So this one might be a little different than our typical. But I have some wonderful questions for Sylvia, a veteran of the L&D space. You've been doing it for a couple decades now, right, Sylvia?
It sounds so long.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Well, I've actually been around for a long time too. It seems like the time goes by so fast. And but I would love to hear more about your story. I have like 10 questions for you that hopefully you were able to kind of look over a little bit in the email that I sent you earlier, because some of these questions are actually they're pretty somewhat comprehensive. So hopefully I don't stump you too much.
Oh, I did not look at them. I just
Okay.
saw a headline that says "Meet you tomorrow," and I was like, "Good." I did not open it.
Well, that's going to make this a lot funner. So we'll see how it goes. But let's start with this. How did you end up as an instructional designer? How did you get into training?
Actually, an instructional designer. So I kind of, like a lot of people's stories, entered through side door, right? That wasn't my background. My background was, a very technical background, science background. I started out as medical technologist, so working in healthcare for a little bit. And then I started in a corporate setting, bringing knowledge that I used in a healthcare setting and experience to help others. I was basically a technical phone rep, technical support, helping, clients of the medical device company that I worked with, use the products. So kind of like a little bit of training and troubleshooting over the phone. And then when the new phone reps joined the company, I was responsible for a lot of training. So that's how I started in training, was really helping support systems training and onboarding training and customer skills training. That's how it all kind of started.
Yeah, so kind of that accidental instructional designer type.
Right.
Wow.
And so I was responsible, started being responsible for building training, for systems, for customer skills, different workshops, and just learning on the fly, like probably a lot of people have done.
Right. And you've been at BD
so I was at BD for over 2 decades. It's a leading medical device technology company.
Love it. But now you have Cherry Learning Coach LLC. So
right,
your own business. It's your own company. How about the inspiration behind that? Like when did you decide to do that? What was your mindset? You're like, is it 21 years? It's time to go out on your own, or what were you thinking when you decided to start Cherry Learning Coach?
I have been thinking about what's next for me, kind of casually. But then I experienced a layoff after all that time. And that was kind of like, hey, you've been thinking about what's next for you. Let's take a pause and figure out what's next for you. And that was what came out of kind of the reflection. Like, you've got all this great experience, lots of value to share with others. How can you do it? And that's where the seed, started to germinate around Cherry Learning Coach. I've been leading teams, leading initiatives for all of that, all of that time. I've learned so many lessons, what not to do, what to do, what works, what doesn't work, and just having a lot of success with different teams. And it seemed like a natural thing to like, let me see how I can add value in a different way.
Wow.
So I've been on this entrepreneurial journey since then.
Yeah, and it's only been like just a couple years, right?
It's been about a year.
About a year. Wow. And so that must be a very, very different sort of experience and journey for you at this point.
Yes, trying to think of your identity in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Because I identified with the same company for so long, with their company values and
Mhm.
their mission, and just thinking around that about yourself. What's your values? What's your mission? How can you bring value to others in a different way? It took me a lot of reflections and iterations to kind of land where I am today.
Wow. Any particular challenges that you've had over the last year, like shifting in that way? Is there anything that you can share about that?
Um, I think just trying to it's really like drinking from a hose.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn, so much to do. It's like thinking, where do you start?
Uh-huh.
And I think a good lesson for me is just choose somewhere to start, because you could be paralyzed with anxiety, thinking about all the things that you have to do. Just choose a starting point, and you know all the skills that you might need to run a business. There's technical skills, business skills, marketing skills. Just choose a couple of things and start there. And I think one thing that helped me um, was just get a calendar. Just do analog, old
Hmm.
fashioned, you
Hmm.
know, desk calendar. And so it's on the desk. It's just super huge. You can't miss it. And just think about, what are my goals for this month?
Hmm.
And just like analog system, write it out. Like, these are my 5 goals, and then start to break down, how am I going to do them? And then at the end of the month, kind of do a reflection about, how did you do against those goals? And it's a lot of the skills that I was using in corporate America, with my teams, kind of looking at goals. I was just using it for myself,
Yeah.
um, and just taking a reflection on those goals. And sometimes I wasn't getting very much done, or it didn't feel like I was getting very much done. And then it was more of an assessment of, are these goals too big, too lofty? Can you break it down to something that's more achievable? And whatever happened during the month, um, also taking a moment to reflect on the wins, giving
Hmm.
yourself grace for what you didn't quite do, but
Hmm.
celebrating that, oh, I got that done. I was able to do these things. I had networking goals. I had typically self-improvement, learning, personal development goals. And I just mapped them out at the beginning of the month, and at the end of the month, did an assessment and plan for the next month. So it helped the momentum and helped me. Again, it's just using those skills that I had used for 2+ decades, but in a different way.
Yeah, no, that is such great advice. It's amazing how just going to analog can be so helpful in that way, right? I know that for myself, that I kind of learned that lesson too, because sometimes I get so wrapped up in the technology that ends up becoming the focus versus actually being.
You're right. And that was really why analog, I think, was working for me, because trying to figure out what tools to use. There's so many tools.
Mhm.
It's just a preponderance of tools, and you don't know where to start, which one's the best. And you can go down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out which tool is going to work for you.
Yeah.
Um, and that's another thing that I think has helped me is just look at the tools that you have, because there's so many shining things, so many things to be excited about giving a try.
Mhm.
But what is it that you already have, and how can you use those? And what maybe there's some hidden gems in those tools
Right.
that you didn't really know. I've learned so much about PowerPoint that I didn't know about. I mean, I thought it was an old fogey type of program,
Mhm.
just PowerPoint death that we had in the corporate world, that I didn't think it was a tool that I could really enjoy. But I've learned to so many other skills with it, and I've learned to enjoy it much more. I've done a lot of graphic type things with it that I didn't know I could do before.
Mhm.
So just looking at, different things within like the Google Suite or the Microsoft Suite, and thinking about them in a different way. YouTube has been my friend. um, so just, trying to figure out what I can use to do things, faster, easier, more enjoyable.
Right, right.
Yeah,
And especially with things that you already have, just
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
no, that's
And
great.
that's a big challenge because when you're in corporate America, not that it's a buffet of tools, but there's a lot of tools at your disposal that you don't even think about the cost of them. But when you're the one that's paying for them, it's a different conversation. You got to
I
think
hear you.
about what value is this going to bring to me? Because everything comes with some kind of, annual subscription or monthly subscription, and it
Mhm.
really, starts to add up.
Right.
So, thinking about things differently, um, has been it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, yeah, no, just being leaner about everything altogether. I mean, in
Yeah.
fact, even just with Google Meet, that is something because I have a Google Apps account, I guess. And so this is kind of my go-to for meetings like this for the most of the time because I don't want to pay for Zoom. I just, as
Hmm.
an independent person myself, like I just don't allocate the budget to that because I already have this tool and it works pretty well. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's things like that. I
Um,
think when you're freelancing or you have to do things independently, you have to think that way. And
yeah, think a little bit differently.
right.
And you asked me, some of the other things that I think about differently. Um, I'm leaning into different frameworks that are helpful. I have some, from, kind of instructional design frameworks that I like, but also just thinking about problem statements that has really helped me. Um, and maybe I'll elaborate a little bit. Like if I want to do something, like I have a germ of an idea and it's kind of fuzzy, what I'll do is think about, and this is, same thing you do when you're approaching a training, um, request, right? You're wanting to dig down into what exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve. And the clearer you can get on the problem, the better your solution is going to be, because then you know what you're solving for. And I think, again, I'm doing this the analog. I've got a notebook that I'm putting down. Here's the problem, and that I think I want to solve, and just iterating on that problem until I feel like I've got a clearer idea of what the problem is and what I'm trying to solve. And it's just like, all these tools that I started to dig into, like with Kathy Moore and Map It,
Mhm.
getting clear on what the problem is, you're going to come out with a better solution.
Yeah.
So that has been really helpful too, problem statement, solution. And if you
Yeah.
can't find a solution, maybe you don't really understand the problem, and
Mhm.
going back to digging into the problem. That
It's
for
it
me has
sounds so
been
simple.
that for me has been very, very helpful.
Yeah. No, that is a great piece of advice as well. I love it. And getting to that solution, I mean, is it so you have your analog notebook or piece of paper in front of you and you're just kind of chasing it down, writing things down. Is it just a process of like just taking the time and really, brainstorming or what is your process for doing that?
Yeah, so that's really the start of me trying to figure out. Um, it's more of a reflective moment, trying to
Mhm.
figure out, do I really understand the problem? I don't want to give you an impression that I don't use digital tools.
Mhm.
I absolutely do.
Mhm.
I love a lot of mind mapping tools like
Mhm.
Milanote. I like that one quite a bit. But the start of it is, something I think physical,
Mhm.
and that's why analog works for me.
Yeah.
It's like the pen to my brain or something, and putting that to paper, and I just buy cheap notebooks
Mhm.
from the dollar store or whatever, and just sit and ruminate on what is the problem I'm trying to solve.
Yeah.
And then I might go to, something like a mind mapping tool where
Mm.
I'm putting the problem clearly in the center, and then I can start to see what actions need to happen around that problem. So I think that saves me time because it becomes clearer what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when you write things down, you have more of a connection to it. I don't know if it's just the fact that you're touching it or, the physical aspect of it, but I totally agree. How important is it for you to really be able to sit down and and work this way when you're beginning on a solution? How much time do you actually spend on it?
Um, Sometimes not enough.
Hmm.
And then, I'll find myself feeling very scattered, wheels are turning in so many different directions. And I've learned to kind of like, okay, let's pull this in. It seems like we need to refocus. And then I might go back to the paper pen exercise.
Love it.
Um, yeah, but the more time I spend in the planning, um, I think I could put number, quantification to it. Um, but the more time I spend in the planning, I think the faster it goes if I'm trying to develop something, design and development for
No,
part of it. It
it's
goes
great.
quicker because, I could, something like a mind mapping tool, I could start to think about, you know, fonts and colors, and, the theme, the look and feel of it,
Mhm.
you know, that goes with the overall solution. Um, yeah, just to look and feel how I want to um, realize the script that I've written.
Love it. Love it. So, having done this for a while, if you've got over 2 decades over at BD, what have you seen as far as the industry is concerned? Well, how have you seen it change over, I mean, the period of time that you've been working as a trainer?
Um, I think for I was in a medical device industry, and that um, we were doing a lot of face to face because
Mhm.
it's medical equipment, medical devices, um, and a lot of the thought was it requires hands on, and there was a lot of resistance to doing anything, augmented reality or virtual reality or digital tools. There was a lot of resistance to doing because you're going to go to um, a clinic or hospital, doing something in a virtual environment and that you haven't touched until you went to a client site. You
Mm.
know, didn't seem with all there's a lot of regulatory um, requirements and in the medical device industry and compliance pieces and um, it was just a lot of resistance to doing these other types of um, learning or even trying them. And then in a corporate environment there's a lot of um, I can't think of a nice word to say this, but there's a lot of things from an enterprise level that are being uh, so it's more, this is the way we do it, this is the tools that we
Mhm.
have, and we're not interested in these other unproven interesting things that you might want to do.
Yeah.
But with the advent of the lockdown from the pandemic, that really sped things up light years as far as what people might have been interested in and might want to try. And, the IT infrastructure, the speed of how that things were being able to be put in place changed, it switched people's mindsets because they had to, right? So that was, I think, in the 20 years, it felt like, this big ocean liner that you were trying to turn and it wasn't turning very fast.
Yeah.
And then, with, there's a tsunami coming, we've got to get this ocean liner out of this ocean, kind of thing. Things move much, much quicker. So I think the clip of change and the interest in change and interest in different tools is what changed in the last, especially the last 5 years.
Wow, interesting. So you must have worked a lot with SMEs.
Yes.
Wow.
So did a lot of product launches, right? So new products being introduced to the market. They're going to hospitals, healthcare settings, and people that are going out to install those or service those, need to be brought up to date on the latest and greatest of, that product iteration or a new introduction of a product. Or people doing phone support, needing to be able to support when the customers, the clients call about that product. And also others within, maybe the manufacturing, they're building the product, but they don't really know what it's used for or the implication of a poor quality product, at the client side, the customer side. So lots of different audiences to speak to. And as new products are being rolled out, the people that had more of the knowledge were, in the research and development area. And, very busy people, very high technical expertise, but they maybe not very close to how the customers are using products or what's going to make sense to them or what's the application of the customer side, what's the use cases. So it was very hard to kind of nail down a training around this product because you were basically learning how things work with the product as it's being built. So it wasn't a complete product that's being handed off to you. It's a product that's being built that you're learning as you're building training, and you're trying to knit together all these people. That the old joke about an elephant and five blind people looking at, experiencing an elephant. One's at the trunk, one's at the tail, at the ears, and they all see something different. So, you've got all of these subject matter experts that's got a little piece of the puzzle, and you're trying to knit that all together into training for these different audiences, for these different uses that they're going to use that training for. It's very dynamic space to be in as a trainer or an instructional designer, even to kind of imagine, from what I'm hearing from all these different pieces, what are going to be the actions that the user needs to understand how to do with this knowledge. So trying to make it not just a knowledge dump, a content dump, but actually how can this apply to that person's role? How can they enable the customer success with the knowledge that they have and what they know how to do? So very, very, very challenging.
So with your vast experience, right? You've got years and also different audiences. How about just like one great tip about working with SMEs?
Great tip. Working with SMEs, I would say they have their time is short. They don't have a lot of time, and so they're not going to understand the jargon that you use as an instructional designer. Um, so being very intentional about what you need from them and what you can bring to the table. Like what can you kind of research before? How can you make it simpler for them around what questions you really need to ask them? Because you need to boil it down, because it can't be an ocean. You need to boil it down to what it is that you really need to it, so you can be respectful of their time, and that they know that you've done some work, that this is a partnership. They're just not there to eat up your time, that you're not there to just eat up their time. I think it's being more respectful of their time and you approaching it in that way. What kind of prep can you do? How can you boil it down to succinct questions that you would need from them? I wish I had that Map It book before. I never knew about Kathy Moore's work when I was in the corporate space. I've just come to it in the last year. I think that would have been really helpful for, but I probably did some of that work in that way, not knowing that I was doing that, but, trying to be intentional with the questions. And I think it came from more some management knowledge and, kind of lean knowledge, not that I was expert in any of those, but, the exposure and the practice of those types of things helped me drill down the types of questions that you're going to ask someone. And like I said, being very respectful of their time, being clear. So the other piece, I know you asked me for one, but the other piece I would say is try to form relationships and not just knocking on doors when you need something from someone. And it's easier to ask someone something, or easier for the person to give something when this is going to sound woo-woo, but when you see them as a whole person, they're just not, it's not just transactional, that you're there to get something from them, that you're forming bonds and relationships with them is, I think has been very helpful to me.
That is great advice. And I've heard that before, like take the time, buy, pick up some donuts or something, or
everybody loves pizza.
Right, exactly. And I've heard that lots of times before. No, those are great. I'm sure we could probably do an entire episode on just your expertise working with SMEs. You must have done so much of that in your in your past experience. It's really, really impressive, especially for the industry that you're working in. It seems like that is a huge part of it. So, and you have like a background using some great tools, Storyline, Rise, Camtasia, Canva, Adobe Illustrator. You have like kind of the what do you call that? It's the just the full run of things that help like produce great content. How did you gain all of that experience? Is that something that you just on your own decided to pick up and just do?
Well, for Articulate, it was this was a solution within our enterprise when I was in corporate. So you're very restricted around what tools you can bring into the ecosystem. So Articulate, the Articulate suite, the 360 suite was one of the tools that we had at a corporate level. So I at the time I started using Articulate, I was working on more software application, more software training. And it was a a global rollout of this software across service teams. So it was a 5-year initiative, and each iteration of it was rolling out to a different region of the world. And as we rolled to another region, the people that were already on the platform became like part of a continuous improvement effort. So it was continuous improvement and rollout initiative introduction all at the same time. So I was a process improvement person, trainer, developing training content. I was doing, wearing a whole bunch of different hats. And e-learning became one of the solutions for me because people that were newly rolling onto a platform had to have an introduction to the system. And I just couldn't be in multiple places at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So the e-learning became a solution for me. And that's where I kind of got introduced to e-learning authoring. And so first it was more writing, design documents and writing scripts and handing it off to someone else that was going to actually develop in Articulate. So that's how I first started. And then it became kind of a budgetary pressure, I would say, to bring that kind of work into the team. And so basically there's a team of technical people, they're very, science, technology-based people. And looking at them to start using this authoring tool, basically like, okay, we're going to teach you how to be instructional designers. It's like, it's not going to happen,
Right.
overnight. So that was my kind of start to digging into myself, learning how to use the authoring tool to see how difficult is this? Can we do this with these, team of people that we have? Can they learn to use this if we, set the parameters around, can we use templates or, what can we do to kind of speed this production line up around the different e-learning solutions that we were thinking about? So I kind of, jumped into the deep end. So after, my 9 to 5, I was doing at night, learning how to use the tool. I'm, going onto LinkedIn Learning and YouTube and, figuring out what I wanted to do and trying, things to see how they worked and, dissecting what other people designed and seeing how they did it and trying to figure it out. And a lot of frustration because I couldn't, I could see things in my mind, but, my skills weren't there to be able to do it.
Right.
But, slowly, building the skills to be able to produce what you see in your mind is I'm not an expert by any means, but I could do so much more
Yeah.
with the authoring tools than what I started with. So that was, my foray into Articulate. And then, that was like pre-pandemic. And then when we rolled in pandemic, there was a lot of interest in getting short video clips of, just in time kind of learning, but using videos. And that was my foray into Camtasia. That was the tool that we were able to use within our ecosystem. So great tools to be able to have at our disposal. So I did very little with Camtasia at the beginning, but within the last year, I've done some self-learning with Camtasia, on my own. And the same with the Adobe Creative Cloud,
Mhm.
that's been more self-learning.
Mhm. Yeah, that whole, all those tools. I mean, that just makes such a great e-learning stack all around, between Canva and Illustrator. You kind of have everything covered. And so,
Yeah, I have learned to love Canva.
mhm,
It has limitations, especially if you know a little bit about the creative, the Adobe Creative Cloud, and you do some comparisons, you can see limitations. But the I think the interface, usability is so much nicer. You
yeah.
know, the Adobe Cloud, when I first opened that, it's just like so intimidating. Such,
Mhm.
the learning curve is like a steep wall, straight up.
Right.
And you just close that program like, oh my God, I'm never going to learn how to do anything in this.
It's true.
Um, but I think just for me, I love the creative nature um, of designing things,
Mhm.
and so it's been kind of pushing myself, um, and make it ugly. Sometimes it just looks horrible until you learn more, and then you can. Sometimes I'll go back and iterate on the design, and I figure out how I could do it better, or there's something else that takes it to the next level.
Love it.
So
No, thanks, Sylvia. And, and speaking of tools and things like that, like how do you, as a veteran of this space, like how do you stay in touch with or stay on top of trends and tools and things like that, your professional development in L&D? Do you have anything specific that you do?
I found training industry maybe about 2, 3 years ago.
Hmm.
And that has been valuable to have a lot of webinars and leader talks and things that you can um, join and connect with others and
Yeah.
learn from vendors, presentations and things like that. Also ATD,
Hmm.
um, the local chapter, and I also was member of the national. So just availing myself of the webinars and offerings. And there's so many um, interesting things that pop up on LinkedIn in your feed about there's a webinar on this or that. And I try to avail myself of all the webinars that I can.
Hmm.
And then, going back and actually listening to recordings and taking notes, and um, YouTube, subscribing to different, instructional designers, YouTubes, and trying to recreate some of their designs. How do
Hmm.
they do that? Trying to figure out how to do it. Um, E-learning heroes from Articulate,
Hmm.
community, just joining, different communities within LinkedIn, within Facebook,
Hmm.
for instructional design, e-learning, just, joining different communities. You know, that's how I came to this one, TLDC. So I just wanted to figure out what communities could I be a part of.
Great.
And, just searching,
Right.
um, you know, to find your tribe.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that with TLDC mostly, there are so many other places out there that you can find really incredible instructional design content on. But for me, like my goal is primarily to find the culture of instructional design and sort of
Mhm.
the people of it, because that's what personally fascinates me the most. I've been in this space forever, and it's always been just the people that I've met at events, at conferences and things like that, that I'm like,
Yeah.
everyone is so generous and they're so interested in sharing their ideas. And just I think trainers by default are just generous people all around. And I'm just fascinated by that. And so I've just created opportunities like this to be able to talk to people like you. So I guess I'm just lucky that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good deal. So, trying to find different groups to join. It's been challenging, with the pandemic, especially when we were kind of locked down and couldn't go very many places. So I was looking for things to join virtually,
Mhm.
just trying to avail myself of all the different opportunities.
Yeah.
I like to walk. So I usually choose a podcast.
Mm.
And I usually choose a podcast by length. So, because I want to have a short walk or a long walk, and that
Yeah,
lots of times determines, what podcast I'm going to choose. But
that's great.
sometimes I'll choose a podcast that's longer and have a shorter walk and kind of build in a cliffhanger so I can come back to the walk and finish the podcast. But just listening, finding different leaders within the
Mhm.
space.
Mhm.
Um, it's been interesting to, picking up tidbits from, people that are asking questions that I didn't think to ask,
Mhm.
or asking questions that I was thinking of, um, and maybe didn't know the answer to. So it's just been interesting, learning from others.
Right.
Yeah, so I love I love learning.
Right.
So that's a fun part,
Yeah.
the and
I think that's what it's all about. That's such an important piece to all of this. So I have to wrap things up, and I want to ask you just this one last question. So Sylvia, if you weren't like an L&D professional, what do you think you would be instead?
that's interesting. I would probably be a writer.
Hmm.
Um, it's a similar type of thing for me, in that in the writing of something that you're bringing together, maybe new ways of looking at things, or a universal idea that you've been able to crystallize in a different way for someone, and and then kind of releasing that and adding value to other people. So I think it's a similar type of work, but being done in a different way.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you're you're still kind of dispersing um, knowledge, I guess my term would be.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's things that are coming through your experience that you put a stamp on, but you're releasing out into the world. You don't know what value um, that's going to have for someone, but it's going to maybe have a value that you didn't even anticipate, and have an impact on someone else's life or success.
Hmm.
And I think that's what we do a lot with training.
Yeah.
We might have a certain intent, but your learners are bringing their own experiences to that work, right?
Hmm.
um, and they're taking away, maybe they're getting what you intended, and they're able to change that behavior, or that impact that performance, or gain that knowledge.
Hmm.
um, but they're taking that and making it something else, um, based on their experiences, and they're taking that out into the world. um, and you've had that kind of impact on them, that they've got that gem to take with them.
Yeah.
And I think writing does a very similar thing. I enjoy writing as well. So I think, that has a similar type of impact.
That's great. That's fantastic. I haven't heard that one before, so that's very thoughtful and very insightful. I mean, the conversation all around has has been that. And I really appreciate your time, Sylvia, and your support at TLDC. I'm looking for, I wish that we could have had the live audience in, because I know that we would have had tons of commentary from folks, because you have really shared some gems with us. And I really appreciate you taking the time, Sylvia. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure, and I'm sorry we couldn't get the whole live thing happening. You know, the technology will get you every time. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.